I do want to begin with you because we want to talk a little bit just about the work that each of you do. And I was struck by a phrase you had. You say that at water.org you try to break the mold of traditional philanthropy. You have a business model that has long emphasized donor satisfaction over recipient needs. And from what I've read about it, you're really trying to create a movement by creating a market, but you say you want to seed that marketplace with a soul. What does that mean, and how does that illustrate what you're trying to do?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is to recognize that, after decades of trying to address the global water supply crisis from the perspective of the poor, and having still nearly 1 billion of the poor without access to water and 2.5 billion without sanitation, it's not working, right? So you can imagine, if we found a cure for AIDS today, and 100 years from now, there were still a child dying every 20 seconds from the disease. And when you look at the fact that we in the United States and other countries have known how to make water safe and to save lives, to wipe out cholera, dysentery, typhoid, and we haven't been able to push these solutions out to find ways to solve this crisis, then you really do have to break the mold. You have to look to see how can we look at things in an unexpected way. How do we throw off the conventional wisdom that all of the poor who lack water and sanitation are too poor to pay for solutions themselves? How can you segment the market and find those people who do have some resources and reach them with economic tools like microfinance so that they can get access to water using some of their own means? So what we're looking at is looking not at people as recipients of charity, but looking at the poor as customers, as citizens who wield incredible power, that all we have to do is help unleash that. And so with things like water credit, we're able to help people break free of loan sharks who would otherwise be paying 125% interest to get a water connection in their home or to build a toilet, and hooking them up with microfinance institutions who can help them get that water connection at a fraction of that price, and then use that extra time they spend not scavenging for water, but working at income-generating opportunities. So there's a lot of potential to be unleashed, but you have to give the system some nudges.
Marcus, let's play a little game here. When you hear a story like that, do you see yourself as an activist saying, if you want to, I want to promote that, or is that not your job? And if it's not, what is it? How do you see yourself as an agent of change?
Well, thank you, George, for that very easy question. It's a very important question. It's one that I think that we ask ourselves a lot as journalists. It's one that the public that reads us and looks at us ask themselves a lot, and there are all kinds of moral implications to it. There's a famous picture, I think it was Ethiopia, Sudan, or Somalia, of a starving child and a bird looking at the starving child. And a photographer, and I was based in Johannesburg at one point, and the photographer who took that picture, I think it was an AP photographer, maybe a white South African AP photographer, if memory serves. There was a huge controversy over what, that photographer who had to take the picture, because someone took that picture, had food, obviously, because he was a Western photographer. What did he do? And that child died, actually. That child was one of many people, if you've ever been to a food a camp where they're giving food to starving, displaced people or refugees, you're aware of the mass of humanity that's there. So that child was one instance of probably thousands, certainly thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people who were starving there, and probably one of hundreds, if not thousands, of starving children at that feeding center. That picture just kind of crystallizes it in a beautiful way, a painful way, because sitting here as a member of the New York Times, the answer to your question is kind of scientifically and perhaps even uncomfortably clear. The answer is we are not activists, we are journalists. And it's uncomfortable because of that picture of that child. That's why it's uncomfortable. The fact is, if I wanted to be an activist, there are many things I could do. There are phenomenal activists, some in this room, There are many people who dedicate their lives to improving these problems, to solving these problems. That is not what we do.
You feed the activists in some way.
Well, you hope. What would you hope you did? And this is to the heart of your question too. Of what do I see when I hear? Well, what I hear is it's a great story. It's a great story because of a few elements. One of the elements, the most important element that makes it a great story is it's counterintuitive. There is a world of prejudice, for instance. Well, the really poor can't afford anything. The really poor can't pay for anything. So that automatically, in a world of market incentives, says there's a disincentive. Don't even think about it. Oh, if you can't give it to them for free, there's no hope. Well, that's a prejudice. That prejudice is incorrect, as we're proving every day. So there's actually hope. And in that counterintuitive reality, the fact that we can write a story that educates the people that their prejudices are incorrect, that's a great story. And as a journalist, what you're always looking for are great stories. The best journalism is going to be the journalism that is not activist journalism, but it's journalism that makes people act.
You're a storyteller. Mm-hmm. You're not encumbered, perhaps, by the mainstream media. You can choose your subjects. You do choose your subjects. Do you have an audience in mind when you set out to tell the story?
I don't have an audience in mind. I think the audience is me. If I find something surprising or something that makes me think about something differently, a person or an idea, that's what I go towards. And I generally go towards subjects that I know absolutely nothing about, because I find that if you're going to spend a couple years of your life following a person or following people doing what they do best, you want to be following somebody that you feel like you can learn from. I learned from the best. I learned from Penny Baker and Chris Hedges, who've made The War Room.
You've spent much of the last year working on 2 films about at least a portion of the Arab Spring. You've been in Egypt, in the story of the revolution, and now the story of the election that will follow. Can you tell yet whether it's a happy story?
This has been one of the most incredible years of my life, following this story. I know everybody says this, it's going to be worse before it gets better, but I really do think that it's going to be, you're talking, everything's being broken apart. When everything is broken apart, there's a big mess. And now it's going to take a while for things to be put back together again. So we filmed the first part, which was basically the smashing of everything apart. It was inspiring, very inspiring to be there. And now we're watching the slow process of it's the presidential campaigns that we're following right now.
Of everything you come across at the Institute, at the Journal, which ones are exciting you the most?
What really, really interests me and excites me is the people who are generating the ideas. The people who might have a fantastic idea, but who might not otherwise be able to get a place in the pages of Foreign Affairs or get a place on a podium, or might have great ideas, are very good at expressing themselves, but don't necessarily have the skills to get those ideas to the right places. And so I think nurturing the people, really the source of those ideas, helping them to figure out what to do with it, whether it's something that Gary's doing, which is really a hybrid of doing work on the ground, but also generating ideas and interacting with people with great ideas, or something like what Jehane is doing, which is using creativity, using human stories to get people to understand each other. There's a wonderful, wonderful moment in Control Room where there's a U.S. military PR guy who's in the middle of this controversy over images of dead Iraqis being shown, which, Americans see them all the time and don't really react. And then there's a controversy over dead U.S. soldiers. And he sees that and all of a sudden has this aha moment in the film where he says, oh, now I get what it must be like for Iraqis to see dead Iraqis. And certainly the stuff that Marcus is doing, this traditional media thought leader, is so important. It certainly social media, a lot of what it's doing is referring back to work like what Marcus is doing. And the ability that Marcus has to have a very, very thoughtful, constructive approach to ideas. I first met him when he did a panel on Iran. He moderated for us one of our very, very first events when we went independent from the New School almost 5 years ago. And met him again when I was on a panel on Haiti after the earthquake, and was just so impressed by that idea to synthesize ideas and bring them together. So the idea is important, but it's not just the ideas, it's the environment.
In your work at water.org, you not only focus on creating those mechanisms to get the water to the people who need it, but the way you go about it is also very important to you. You define it as something you call a liquid network, which is in many ways something we're trying to create tonight. So try to draw out that idea a little more.
This whole concept of things that we learn from different directions, like the Arab Spring, for instance. What does that mean to people who don't have water and sanitation? We look at that and see that was a way for people to find their democratic voice using social media to a large degree and to mobilize themselves. And so we look to borrow ideas from other spaces. Nobody has their own complete idea. We all complete each other's idea, and that's the concept of the liquid network, where ideas can flow almost frictionlessly across sectors to different organizations and different approaches. That's why water credit worked. We didn't go out and invent microcredit. We just discovered it and nudged it towards water and sanitation and the poor. You know, we didn't discover social media and how you create this movement, you know, in Egypt and elsewhere, but we think we might be able to nudge that towards the poor. So the fact is that there's billions of dollars being invested every year from the top down into water infrastructure, but it doesn't find the poor. The pipes go into the cities and they go right past the slums. How do you help people to understand and participate? You know, how do you help them hold their water utility or their government accountable for those services that are supposed to be targeted towards them in the same way your democratic vote is supposed to be targeted towards you? And how do you hold them accountable to provide those services that they're supposed to be providing? So to me, that's the liquid network. It's about discovering innovation on behalf of the poor. I mean, how do you get as much money that we invest in discovering the next generation of this iPhone? I mean, if we had a fraction of that kind of investment in water and sanitation ideas to spark new directions, I mean, we could make great progress.
Is there a way to make money in getting water to people who don't need it?
There is. And we don't come at it from that perspective, but we don't have a problem if a microfinance institution makes a small profit. The whole idea is, I think we're better and more respectful of the poor if we can look at them as people who have these intrinsic powers as customers and as citizens to leverage these services, whether it be through the market or through the ballot box or through protesting to get those basic services that they're entitled to.
And Marcus, you described so much of your job as telling stories, but it's also to hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because with the, and Michele raised that question of kind of, and we've talked about a lot tonight, social media, new media versus the old media and the old mainstream media. I mean, for us, the kind of walls between accountability and, you know, we used to, in our jobs, we used to talk to people and people would listen or turn us off, that was it. Well, but now people talk back to us, and so we...
And correct us immediately.
Exactly. And you know, while some days it can be tough, right? It's incredibly powerful because leaders still pay attention to us, but also leaders, we're also conduits now for communication coming from the world back up to those leaders. And I think it makes us much more powerful. I mean, my job right now is kind of giving a digital voice to the International Herald Tribune and making it so that we have comment and community in a way that the world, this is very disparate readership of the IHT, talks back to us and through us talks to the people who matter, who read our paper. And I think that's incredible. It's kind of an exponential, you know, multiplier of power of all of us, both the power, the voice of people, ordinary people in the Arab street, for instance, and also the power of traditional media too. All of our power grows in that kind of calculation. And we don't even know where it's going to take us yet. It's just exciting to see it all happen.
I don't think any of us know where it's going to take us, but we hope a lot of you talk about that more tonight at your tables. We just wanted to get things started right now. Congratulate again our honorees.